Welcome to the Terrain and Site Plan seminar. In this session, I'm going to go through the steps to create a site plan and show you how the terrain tools work. If you'd like to follow along with this video and complete the Chief Challenge, see the link below on our Chief Talk user forum page and you can download the sample plan for the video. Remember to post your results on social media using the hashtag Chief Challenge. Let's go into the program and get started. For this project, I'm going to be using the Bachelor View sample plan. You can find that on our website under chiefarchitect.com/samples. Let's begin by talking about the tips for creating your terrain and site plan. My first tip is to be sure you're using the Save Plan View. Our default template includes a plot plan saved plan view. For the video, we're using the Terrain Modifiers Save Plan View. In my menu, you can see the drop down for the Save Plan Views. I've customized this for the video to call it the Terrain Modifiers. I want you to see all of the components that I'm using to generate the terrain. Separately, when I create my plan, I'm using a Site Plan View or the Landscape View. As you can see on your screen now, these two views are similar but different levels of detail. The next tip when you're creating your terrain is to use the Terrain Toolbar configuration. You'll find that setting in my toolbar over on the right hand side of the screen. When you use this configuration, notice how my tools are now relevant to terrain related tools. Be sure to turn that back when you go back to the default configuration. It will change your menu bar back to more commonly used tools. For the video, I'm going to be using the Terrain Configuration toolbar. Be sure to set a north pointer if you want your bearing accuracy. I'm going to do that when we get started. Set your CAD default to be in decimal feet and also to be quadrant bearing. There are other options if you live in different parts of the country. You may want to look at changing. Place the terrain and site information on the most relevant floor level. For the project, as you see in the lower right hand screen, this is a two-story house with a walkout basement really, and I'm going to create my terrain on floor 0. You can create your terrain on any floor. I would just suggest you create it on the most relevant floor that you find is easiest to modify. Next tip is to draw the terrain perimeter larger than the lot so you can see roads and etc. that may extend beyond the lot boundary. If you draw just to the lot boundary and you want to have a road that is outside of the lot, you will not be able to see that road in 3D when you generate a 3D view. So just make your terrain perimeter larger than the lot so you can see those ancillary items. Terrain elevation can be relative to zero height. It can also be relative to the absolute elevations. I'm going to go through and show you how to do both of those things. When you're creating your terrain, be sure to position the terrain and not the house. There's two steps to that. One is for the site boundary. If you want your house corner to be 10 feet off the setback, move your terrain items and don't move your floor plan items. That's just my tip. It's easiest to do. The next one is for the elevation of the terrain. Again, you're going to be setting that in the terrain itself and not the house. We'll adjust that from the height of the terrain with respect to the subfloor. If you do much terrain work and like to show that in your plans, import the terrain data from your surveyor. We have a really good video on that. If you search for video 1056, it will walk you through the process of importing a DWG file. A less accurate option can be tracing from an image and then using a point-to-point resize to create your lot. Avoid using elevation points, and if possible, consider using elevation regions. When you use the elevation tools, I like to use elevation lines, and I try to, at all possible, avoid using points. It just gets more complicated. When you're sloping a lot, as I have in this view here, it does take two elevation lines to create a slope. Remember to draw the second line for a very simple slope like I have here on the screen. Let's get started with creating our terrain. Let's zoom out and slide over to where our house is located. I've already drawn in the roads and you can see the floor plan of the basement or the daylight basement level. One of the first things that I do for a site plan is I like to make sure that the roof and the overhang is on. With my reference display, I can toggle that on and you can see the roof. And if you're curious about reference display, you can tap on the floor indicator, come down here, and you can see that I've created a reference display for the roof overlay. Click the Define button, and using this layer set called Reference Roof Display, I only have the roof planes and the walls that form the deck turned on with a lighter gray style color. To create a terrain perimeter, you'll find this in your menu, and you can only create one terrain perimeter per plan. When you create the terrain perimeter, it's going to try to fill the space for your plan. I'm going to make this a little bit smaller and pull it in just in that area. Now the terrain perimeter is much larger than the lot. If we zoom in, this is a picture of the image of the lot. And if you look at this image, the lot itself boundary is much smaller than the road, but by creating the terrain perimeter to encapsulate the road, when you take your 3D overview, you'll be able to see that road. Now the basic flat perimeter comes in, and there is zero contour to these perimeters. They come in at a relative zero to the terrain and the house itself. Let's go through and begin looking at making some modifications to the terrain. And as we kind of zoom into the front of the house, first thing is I want to raise the terrain up with respect to the house. What I'm going to do is double click on the terrain. Underneath the general panel, I'm going to come down for the building pad, and I'm going to remove the automatic check mark. You can see that the terrain subfloor height is just over 22 inches. I'm going to reduce that to 8 1/4 inches so that the subfloor is above the terrain by 8 1/4 inches. So you can see how that jumps up, and now as we rotate around the back, remember this has a daylight basement. If we peek underneath, you can see that we're going to have to slope this terrain down around this area. And if you look at the floor plan view in that image, this is a picture that we had from the assessor's database, and it shows the contour of the lot. And this lot is basically sloping from front to rear about 12 feet. The front of the lot is at sea level 3820, and at the rear of the lot it slopes down to 3808. Let's take a look at the process of how you might slope this lot. And I might make this just a little bit smaller. I put some CAD points in here for the purpose of the video to help me in drawing this quickly. Here's what I'm going to do to create this lot shape. This is an image that I have down here. I'm just going to make a copy of that, and I'm going to slide a copy of it over so we can see it right in this area right in here. And if we zoom in just a little bit, you'll notice that this lot is 182 feet along this bottom line boundary. I'm going to use the point-to-point resize tool, click on the image, and I'm going to come down into the menu in the bottom, and I'm going to use this point-to-point resize. I'm going to click on this point. I'm going to drag over to the other point. When the dialog opens, I'm going to type in 182 feet to scale this image based on that lot line. Now I'll go ahead and zoom out, and I'm going to take this image and I'm going to superimpose it over the lot itself. The tool that I use to do that would be the point-to-point move. I'm going to use this point-to-point move. I'm going to click in this area right here, and we'll come up and try to snap right on that corner right in there. That should be very close. Now tracing over the lot, I'm going to use the line tool. I'm going to begin up at the top up here, and I'm going to come in, and as I'm dragging this line out, I'm using Chief Architect Premiere. As I'm still dragging it out, I'm going to press the Tab key, and we know that this line in particular for the top boundary is 163 feet, and if I use a negative number since I'm dragging it from the right to the left, that will be exactly 163 feet with that line. We'll snap onto the top of that, come down. This line, as I'm dragging it out, again press the Tab key, is 100, and again I'm moving from the top to the bottom, minus 158 feet. And then we'll come over here. This line is 182 feet. We'll go ahead and press the Tab key, and we'll enter in 182 feet. And then for this line, we'll go ahead and click and drag up. Again, I'm pressing the Tab key as I do this. This number should be 56 feet 11.2 inches. And then for the last line segment, here's what I'm going to do. Let's zoom in just a little bit further. I'm going to come down. I'm not going to worry about pressing the tab key. That's 6 feet or so. Draw a line segment there. I'm going to draw one more line segment in here. So I have 2 line segments, and then the last one I'm going to come over and snap that on. Let's go ahead and begin by curving that. I'm going to click on the line segment. I'm going to use the Convert to Arc tool, grab this diamond, and I'm just going to pull it in right around that area around the road. We'll do the same thing up here. Go ahead and curve this segment, and we should be very close to getting that in that area right in there. So using the trace tool, I was able to use the image and just trace over it with the line. Now the next step I'm going to do is click on this closed polyline, and this is going to represent the actual lot itself. I'm going to open it up, and I'm going to change the layer that it's on by going to the line style. It comes in the default called CAD plot line. I'm going to click the Define button, and I have a specific layer for my terrain. Come down, and I've created one called the Terrain Perimeter Lot. I'm going to set that on there, and now I've assigned that layer. I also have a different color for it, and now I've created that lot, and then I can simply delete the image that we used previously. I'm just going to press the delete key. I have an extra copy of it down here that I need. This will represent the lot boundary. For the setback on the lot, it's required to be 15 feet on all sides of the lot. I'm going to make a copy of the main lot, and I'm going to resize that to be 15 feet inside. To do that, let's go into our preferences and come down to the CAD Edit Behaviors, and I'm going to set the concentric jump to be that value of 15 feet. With that loaded in, I'm going to click on the lot itself. I'm going to choose the Copy button in the lower section of the menu, and then I'm going to use the Copy, Paste, Hold position, create a copy of that. I'm going to come up, I'm going to hold the letter C down on my keyboard and then left click and drag. I'm going to go ahead and double click to open it up. I'm going to change the layer from the Terrain Perimeter Lot, and I should have a setback layer that I've already created. It has a different line style, and use that as the setback for the lot. Now if we zoom in a little bit, you can see that I need to do a little bit of cleanup in this area. So I'm just going to use these edit handles, pull these down, snap them approximately into place. I'm not going to worry about being too exact, and that should be pretty close to having the setback that's 15 feet on each side of the lot. Next, I want to display the length of the lot boundary and then create the north pointer. First, to display the lot line dimensions, I'm going to double click and open up the lot perimeter. On the line style, I'm going to come down and I'm going to turn on show length and show angle. Next, I'm going to create a north pointer. You can see the image that we traced over has the north pointer in it. You'll find a north pointer underneath the line tool. I'm going to come down here and click and drag the north pointer. When I did that, you're going to notice that the information changed on the angles. And as you rotate the north pointer around, these angles will then update accordingly. So I'm just going to make this parallel, and you might eyeball it. I'm going to slide it over the top of the north pointer. That's pretty much parallel. That looks good. And I'll just slide it off to the side. If you want to be exact with your bearing information, be sure to draw your north pointer, otherwise the program will assume that it is straight up and down. We currently have the setback, the lot, and the terrain perimeter. In fact, I'm going to make this terrain perimeter a little bit smaller in this area. Let's take a look at the process to slope the terrain. Using our full camera overview tool, let's take a look at what we have in 3D. You can see the terrain is flat, front to back. And the first step that we're going to do is we're going to slope this from the road down about 12 feet. The easiest way to slope your terrain is to use the Terrain Line tool. As I began the video, I try to discourage using terrain points or elevation points. They can get detailed and can be complex to work with. You might think about using the elevation line and elevation splines. I prefer to use the elevation regions. I'm going to begin by just using an elevation line. When you click and drag this line, be sure to go through the entire terrain perimeter. See the boundary of this? My line extends past that. The next thing I'm going to do is draw another line to the bottom of the terrain. The first one that I would have drawn would have come in at 0 feet relative to the terrain. This one also would have come in at 0 feet, and I'm going to open it up and I'm going to change it to be minus 12 feet so that it slopes the terrain. When you're in a 2D view and you don't see the contours update, sometimes you have to force the terrain to be rebuilt. It will be rebuilt automatically when you go into 3D. Let's go ahead and go into the 3D view and take a look at what we have. So you can see that it's sloping the terrain, and some of the things that's causing the terrain not to be a nice smooth slope are the roads and the terrain wall that we have drawn in the program. All of those things can cause the terrain to be a little bit different than expected. If there were no objects in here and it was just a flat terrain, you'd see a nice slope that would gradually go down to the bottom at 12 feet. Now let's go back and I'm going to show you my preferred approach in creating these things. I'm going to press undo a couple of times here. I prefer to use the terrain tool called the elevation region. Using this tool, you can control the terrain in a more accurate and easier manner, in my opinion. First terrain region should come in at relative 0. I'm going to draw one more in the back of the terrain. And again, I want this to do a similar slope of about minus 12 feet. Now to be exact, here's what I'm going to do to figure out what this lower terrain region is. I'm going to click on one of the rooms in the bottom and open it up, and I'm going to figure out what the elevation is for this structure. On the structure panel, if I come down and I look at what the floor is, it says it's at minus 135 and 7/8. You can see it in the diagram. For the walkout patio, I'm going to make it slightly below the minus 135. I'll just round it up and use minus 136 on that lower elevation region. That should create a nice flat patio area as you walk out the daylight basement. Double click on this. I'm going to open it and I'm going to put in minus 136 in inches. Let's regenerate the terrain and take a look at what this looks like in the 2D view, and then we move back over into the 3D view and you can see the change in 3D. It's maybe not much better, but you can begin to see the slope. And I'm going to go back in and modify those terrain regions so it kind of goes around the house and we can create a nice easy slope. Back over into the floor plan view, let's zoom in a little bit. And to make this an easier process, I did put some subtle CAD points in here that I'm going to snap to. You might see this first grouping, I'm using orange CAD points. I'm going to create a break using the break tool. You'll notice that there's a shortcut for break, number 3 on the keyboard. I'm going to put a break in this area, and then I'm going to pull this down, snap it into place. Now, one of the tips that I may not have discussed early on, you want to be careful not to overlap your terrain regions. I just overlapped terrain region 1 with terrain region 2. That's going to cause some problems perhaps in the program because one of those is set to a very different elevation while one of them is set to minus 136. So be careful not to overlap your terrain regions. So I'm going to come in here, I'm going to shape that. Notice that it's going around the road and then around the house. I'm going to take this lower terrain region, kind of do the same thing. I'm going to pull this up and I put some blue CAD snaps, probably pretty difficult to see on your screen. And all I'm doing is using this as a guideline right in here. And I'm just going to put a few breaks in here so that we can pull this down, pull it into place. We'll zoom in just a little bit. You can see that I have a CAD point right in this area right here. And then I'm just going to snap it into place. And that should be pretty close to what I need. Let's go back into the 3D view and take a look. As we look around here, this looks like a pretty harsh area where that terrain wall is. I probably need to come in here. Let's zoom in. Let's click on that terrain region. And I'm going to put one more break in here. And we'll just kind of pull this down just a little bit so that it snaps onto another point. And hopefully that's going to clean that up. Again, we're very close right in that region. That's where we're looking at in here. And that's why we're creating that big elevation drop. So let's see what we have in here. Also pull this back over so that it's not sloping clear past that other area. And then one more change in this area. Let's go ahead and pull this back. I'm going to put a break right in this area. Again, I don't want any overlapping points. That looks better. Let's rebuild our terrain. That looks pretty smooth in the 2D view, and in the 3D view you can see that we've smoothed that terrain out, and that looks pretty close to what we need on the back of the house. One of the frequent questions that comes up is in your floor plan view if you want to use sea-level terrain. We are using a relative terrain where the top of the grade is at 0 and then all of the numbers are just whole numbers based on that 0 level terrain. And if you want to create a sea-level terrain, in this case the finished grade up here should be 3820. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to open up the terrain perimeter and I'm going to come into where our subfloor height is. And I'm going to say plus 3820 in feet. Let's just go ahead and copy that number because I'm going to have to use this 2 more times. Plus 3820 feet. And then I'm going to do the exact same operation on the terrain regions we created, plus 3820. That will resolve in inches. And then we'll just do the same thing. Plus 3820, rebuild the terrain, and now you can see those are now displaying in sea level numbers. And back in the 3D view you can see that there is actually no change at all because we made the changes in all of the elevation information. If you plan to use sea level elevation information, do that at the beginning when you create your terrain perimeter, and then all subsequent elevation data will use that as the basis. Using the elevation camera, I'll generate the side elevation. In this elevation view, I want to switch the layer set so I can superimpose and turn on the terrain. I'm going to come over and I'm going to turn on my active layer display set, and I've built a specific layer set that has the terrain already turned on. In this vector style view, you'll be able to see the terrain layer that's on. What I like to do is transition the camera filter to the glasshouse view, and then I like to draw a CAD line that will represent the terrain. Using the CAD Line tool, I'm going to come in here and I'm just going to draw a line approximately over the top of the terrain, and then I'm going to go ahead and switch the layer set back so that it does not have the terrain view on. Once we've done that, I'll switch the camera back to the vector style view, and now you can see this terrain line. And a lot of times what you can do is maybe change that line style. Right now it's a solid line. Here's what I might do. I might make it a dashed line, and then you can do the appropriate call out on that terrain so that it will specifically what that is. We have a story pole dimension tool. If we were to run the story pole dimension, you could come in here and add a marker to that. If I show you the finished view that I've created, here's the way I've used the annotation to call out not only the dimensions, but you can see in my text where the terrain is at the subfloor level in the front, and then as you can see it transition and slope, and I did that by toggling on the layer for the terrain and just using the CAD line and tracing over the top of it. Here's a view of the finished site plan that I've created for this project. You can see that it excludes all of the terrain modifiers that have been used to slope and generate the terrain around the house. Let me show you how I've done this by changing my Save Plan view and layer set. From my floor plan view in my menu, I have a drop down for the Save Plan views. I have a specific Save Plan view for the site plan. You can also access the Save Plan views from your project browser, which I have open on the right hand side of my screen. And if you wanted to open that up simultaneously, I'll just double click on the site plan. You can see when this view opens up, all of the terrain modifiers, the terrain elevation regions, have been turned off in the layer set that I'm specifically using called Plot Plan for this Save Plan view. If I tile my screens up here, let's go ahead and tile our screens. The view on the left is the site plan, and the view in the center is the terrain modifiers. I like to create a Save Plan view that has a terrain modifiers such as this terrain elevation region, but on the site plan I like to make sure that layer is turned off, And then when I send that out to my construction drawings through the layout page, it's a very clean view of the site plan. For those of you that may do landscaping plans, as I have on my screen, you will find over 4,000 plants, tools for stepping stones, and all the tools to create swimming pools and fencing. For this project, I have created all the landscaping elements and then blocked and saved them into my library. As I switch my saved plan view to the specific landscaping view that I've created and the layer set, I'll place the landscaping architectural block. I'll rotate it 180 degrees. Then, using the point-to-point move tool found in the lower edit menu, I'm going to position it into place. Now, I have quickly added all of the landscaping items for this project. And as I move back over and look at this in 3D, you can see all of those elements added with the landscaping that really can help the client see what their brand new project is going to look like.
Just to kind of wrap up, make sure that you are taking advantage of our learning resources. We have free webinars every Thursday. Next week, we have a webinar Thursday at noon. One of our folks here that does a lot of rendering will be conducting the rendering at noon Pacific time next Thursday. And so we have on-demand training classes that are available. If you want to be taking one of our on-demand training classes, you can watch those at your convenience. We do one-on-one training where we screen share the video playlists, how-to articles, Chief Talk. There's a lot of you out there that do a great job in helping one another out. Make sure you take advantage of those things.
I would encourage you to download our Chief Challenge terrain file you can find on our Chief Talk user forum and try out the terrain tools for yourself. If you're not already a customer, you can download a free trial version of our software. Please share your results on social media using the hashtag Chief Challenge.
And hopefully we will see you next Thursday at noon for our rendering seminar. Have a wonderful day.
And have fun using Chief Architect software.